down 39.88% in 2022. Is Qualcomm an excellent dividend stock to buy for 2023? I'm going to answer that question looking at several different metrics in this video, so let's get right into it. The first thing I'm going to look at is Qualcomm's revenue growth going back to before 2014 on a quarterly basis. And looking at that, they have experienced fluctuations in their revenue growth. It was trending downward from 2014 all the way until the first quarter of 2020, and then the pandemic created a boom in demand for its semiconductor chips that are used mostly in the Internet of Things, devices, mobile headsets, and more recently the growth in automotive usage of its chips, and that's fueling growth. And growth exploded to over 40% for several consecutive quarters. It's slowing, but still 22% growth in its most recent quarter. The next thing I want to look at is its operating income going back to the same time until before 2014. And we see two different trends here. We see the downward trend from 2014 all the way until 2019. And then we see explosive operating income growth reaching 4.7 billion in its most recent quarter. So a dramatic turnaround for Qualcomm. And the company sees continued growth ahead, especially from the Internet of Things, connected devices, in other words, and then also from automotive. Their chipsets are being increasingly used in inside cars, and so that's going to continue to fuel growth for Qualcomm in the near term and the longer term. Next, let's look at its cash flow from operations, where we see relatively flat going all the way back to 2014. No real trend, just a lot of fluctuations, which is understandable. It's a cyclical industry, and so you would expect fluctuations. But the good news for investors is that it's consistently it's driving billions in cash from operations. It even had a quarter over 4 billion in cash from operations. But if you had to look down the line here, you could say it averaged about 2 billion in cash flow from operations per quarter, which is pretty good. It's not you can't complain about generating 2 billion in cash flow from operations. The next thing to look at is Qualcomm's dividend per share. Of course, if you're a passive income investor or an investor looking for dividends, you're going to want to look at its dividend per share growth history. And for Qualcomm, it's delivered very nice dividend per share growth going back to 2014. It was paying below $1.50 per share in dividends, and it's almost doubled to $2.86 per share in the most recent year. So steady, not explosive dividend per share growth. And given the operating profitability, you can reasonably expect Qualcomm to continue growing its dividend per share over the next 5 to 10-year future. Finally, let's look at Qualcomm's valuation. And since it's consistently profitable, I chose to use the price to earnings forward ratio to determine if the stock should be or is inexpensive or cheap. And looking at the price to earnings forward of 11.4, it's about the average it has traded for going back until the last year. And a price to earnings of 11.4 is relatively cheap compared to the S&P 500. So if you're looking at a relatively inexpensive stock to buy that pays a growing dividend, then Qualcomm is certainly one that you can buy in 2023. All right, so that's all I've got for this video. Thank you for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time. I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/parkev for the 10 best stocks to buy now.